After meeting up with our tour group in Lithgow, we headed west on the Great Western Highway at the start of another 2-day adventure with Great Divide Tours. Our tour leader, Greg, turned north off the highway near Meadow Flat as we travelled through gently undulating sheep grazing farmland. On day one of our tour, Greg took us to a couple of old gold mining towns, including Hill End. He used his knowledge of the area to take us by a more interesting scenic route. The drive so far has been very pleasant over good gravel roads. Further on, we found ourselves climbing over a hilly wooded area, with the track becoming more interesting. Travellers on this tour included Enzo and Kathy in their Land Cruiser 200 series, and Michael in his Toyota Fortuner. Anne and I tagged along as Taylor and Charlie in our Nissan Patrol. Before long, we were back into grazing land, this time driving through a horse property. After passing a farm complex, the road followed the Turon River. After a short stretch of bitumen, we drove into the main street of Sofala. For many years, Anne and I have had an interest in the gold rush history of Victoria, especially in the high country, so we were particularly interested in this area, which was new to us. Established when gold was discovered in the area in 1851, Sofala claims to be the oldest surviving gold mining town. Now relying on tourism, it has a population of only just over 200 people. Things to do in Sofala include gold panning and fishing in the Turon River, walks through gold diggings and historic graveyards, and a Chinese mining settlement. And yes, it still attracts prospectors today. Greg was always there for a chat and to answer any questions on the tour. From Sofala, we drove over the Turon River and headed for Hill End, now on a bitumen road. Upon arrival at Hill End, Greg led us straight through town to a spot where we could set up for lunch. It was obviously the high end of town. And as for the picket fences, they were amazing. A true art form. From our lunch spot, a road led up to a lookout overlooking Hawkins Hill, once known as the richest quarter mile in the world. The lookout is named after Henry Beaufoy Merlin, a showman, illusionist and photographer who documented the goldfields and mining towns of New South Wales. Back in town, the kangaroos had moved in. Hill End still has many original Victorian buildings. At its prime in the 1870s, its population grew to be 8,000. At this time, it had 2 newspapers, 5 banks, 8 churches, and like any self-respecting gold mining town, it had over 24 pubs. It was time to start heading back to our overnight accommodation at Oberon. But we weren't going back the way we came. Greg had chosen the bridle track. This looked very interesting indeed. Greg assured us that there was no problem about the road closure, as he knew a way around it. The bridle track was established about 1850, a narrow track suitable for pedestrians or on horseback. In 1878, the track was widened into a horse-drawn carriage roadway. Further upgrades were made between 1937 and 1940. Starting with approximately 70 unemployed men in 1937, the workforce expanded to about 250 men in 1939. Greg led us down the bank to his do tour. This involved crossing the river. The Wallaroo didn't hang around to watch. Greg drove over first, taking it at walking pace. It was obvious that this crossing had been used many times before, and that it had been cleared of any major obstacles. One by one, Greg talked us through on the 2-way radio. Kathy seemed to be enjoying the river crossing as Enzo guided the cruiser through. Michael was next, his dash-mounted camera recording it all. And Anne handled it as she usually does. Climbing up from the river on the alternate route, Greg soon had us on the bitumen and heading for Oberon and our accommodation for the night. The next morning at Oberon, what a sight! The August winter's morning and Oberon's elevation of 1,113 metres had brought snow, not uncommon at this time of the year. While others played in the snow, we headed into the dining room for a warm-up at the fire and breakfast. After packing the vehicles, we left the motel and headed out into the winter wonderland. Abercrombie River National Park was our destination today as Greg led the group out of town on the Jenolan Caves Road before turning onto Shooters Hill Road. The countryside was transformed, covered with white as far as the eye could see. Our tour leader Greg lives in Mudgee and specialises on trips around the Western Blue Mountains. But since his first trip with Great Divide Tours in 1993, He has also led trips everywhere, including the Kimberley, the Simpson Desert, Cape York and the Victorian High Country. When we reach Brass Walls Road, we follow the signs to the new entrance of the park. Abercrombie River National Park is a small reserve at only 19,000 hectares, but it provides a pleasant natural break in the landscape between vast areas of cleared grazing land and large areas of pine plantations. This was a new experience for Anne and I. We have travelled through the Victorian High Country, but not through a snowfall, as most of the tracks are closed during the winter months. Unfortunately, the snow soon melted, just leaving a wet and muddy track. At our morning smoko break, we knew that it was cold, as Greg wasn't wearing his shorts. The park has a vast network of fire trails. Without a good map and the necessary knowledge, it wouldn't be hard to get lost. The park includes the catchments of Silent Creek and the Retreat River, as well as a 42-kilometre section of the Abercrombie River. With all this water around, you are sure to come across a few water crossings. Michael was enjoying putting his well-set-up Fortuna through its paces. No fees are required for any of the campsites in the park, but you must book online. The Sink campground does have a toilet, but you need to bring your own drinking water and firewood. The Sink is situated beside the Retreat River and is supposed to be named after an old kitchen sink that was found there once, but there is no sign of it now. There are plenty of wallabies, and platypus can be spotted in the river, usually in the early morning or at dusk. The track became particularly hilly at this point, with many steep climbs and descents back down to the river. Beside the Abercrombie River is another pleasant campsite known as the Beach, due to its sandy bank. As we neared the end of our 2-day adventure, we topped it off with a great view of the park as Greg led us up to Bald Hill Lookout. We had thoroughly enjoyed our weekend adventure with the other travellers and Greg, who had shown us some amazing country that we had not previously explored.